Humility is a foundational virtue in the spiritual life, deeply influencing how we relate to God, others, and even ourselves. At its core, humility is the ability to recognize our true place in the grand scheme of God's plan. It allows us to see ourselves not as the center of the universe, but as part of a divine design much greater than our individual desires and ambitions. Through humility, we accept that our lives are not our own, but rather they belong to God, who calls us to fulfill a purpose beyond what we can often perceive. Embracing God's mission is the process of understanding and answering His call in our lives. Each of us is uniquely created with talents, gifts, and experiences that equip us to play a role in God's greater plan. This mission, however, is not always immediately clear or easy to accept. It involves a deep understanding of God's will, often requiring us to step out of our comfort zones, face challenges, and surrender our personal desires to His divine purpose. Humility is essential in this journey, as it enables us to receive God's calling with open hearts and minds, free from the pride or arrogance that may hinder us from hearing and responding to His voice. Humility plays a crucial role in our ability to embrace the mission that God has for us. To accept our divine calling, we must first recognize that we are not the architects of our own lives, but rather we are participants in God's design. Humility allows us to acknowledge that we do not have all the answers and that we need God's guidance in order to walk the path He has set before us. Without humility, we may become self-reliant, focused on our own plans, and unable to hear God's voice or see His hand at work in our lives. When we practice humility, we open ourselves to hearing God's call. Regardless of how it may challenge our preconceptions or life plans, it is through humility that we learn to trust in God's wisdom, knowing that His plan is always better than anything we could devise on our own. In this way, humility is not just a virtue we practice, but a necessary disposition to fully embrace the mission that God entrusts to us. The purpose of this article is to explore the importance of humility in embracing God's mission and how we can cultivate this virtue in our daily lives. By reflecting on the connection between humility and God's calling, we can better understand how to align ourselves with God's will and respond faithfully to His purpose for our lives. Practicing humility in everyday moments through small acts of service, surrender, and trust helps us fulfill the divine mission we are called to, leading us to a life of deeper meaning and spiritual fulfillment. Humility is often misunderstood as self-deprecation or the act of belittling oneself. However, true humility is not about diminishing our worth or pretending to be less than we are. Rather, humility is the recognition of who we truly are in relation to God and the world around us. It is a virtue that helps us understand our role in God's divine plan and live in accordance with the dignity He has given us. Humility begins with self-awareness. It's the ability to acknowledge our strengths and weaknesses without pride or shame. Humility teaches us that we are not the center of the universe. While we are unique and important in God's eyes, we must remember that everything good in life flows from God. Our talents, our successes, and even our opportunities come from His grace. Humility invites us to shift our focus from ourselves and look to God as the ultimate source of all blessings. In practicing humility, we recognize that we are part of a larger plan and that our purpose is tied to God's will, not our own desires. Humility allows us to accept that our lives have meaning, not because of our personal achievements or status, but because of our place in God's greater purpose. When we understand this, we begin to see that the good we do and the life we lead are not just products of our own efforts, but are part of God's design for us. Humility frees us from the pressures of self-promotion and success and allows us to rest in the knowledge that our value comes from being beloved children of God, not from what we accomplish. Furthermore, humility helps us grow in gratitude. It leads us to acknowledge that everything we have, our time, our health, our family, our work is a gift from God. Instead of focusing on what we lack or what we believe we deserve, Humility shifts our attention to what we've been given, encouraging a heart of thankfulness. It is through this lens that we can begin to see the world with new eyes, appreciating the abundance of God's gifts and understanding that everything we have is a blessing meant to be used in service to Him and others. Humility is a crucial element in recognizing and accepting the mission that God has set for us. Without humility, we may fall into the trap of self-importance, thinking that our way is the best or that we have all the answers. We may become so focused on our own plans and ambitions that we fail to listen to God's calling. Humility allows us to let go of our own will and surrender to God's direction for our lives. It enables us to recognize that God's plans are far greater than our own and that we must be open to hearing His voice. A humble person is willing to assess their abilities honestly. This does not mean thinking less of ourselves, but rather recognizing our strengths and limitations with clarity. When we are humble, we do not overestimate our abilities, nor do we shy away from the mission God has entrusted to us because we feel unworthy. Instead, we approach God's calling with trust and a willingness to serve. Humility opens our hearts to God's direction, allowing us to accept His mission, even when it requires stepping out of our comfort zones. For example, consider the story of Moses. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses initially resisted, feeling unqualified and unworthy of the task. Despite his doubts, Moses humbly accepted God's call. His humility was not in denying his own abilities, but in recognizing that, even with his flaws and weaknesses, God could work through him to accomplish His divine purpose. Moses did not rely on his own strength or wisdom, but trusted in God's guidance, and through his humility, he became a key figure in the deliverance of the Israelites. Similarly, humility enables us to accept that our mission may not be the grand or visible role we envision for ourselves. It may not always come with accolades or recognition. However, by being humble, we learn to see God's work in even the smallest acts of service. We understand that our purpose is not to seek glory for ourselves, but to glorify God in whatever task He gives us, whether it is raising a family, serving in our community, or simply living out our daily responsibilities with integrity and love. Humility also allows us to embrace God's plan, even when it feels uncomfortable or unappealing. In our human nature, we tend to resist things that challenge us or make us feel inadequate. Yet, it is often in these moments of discomfort that God does His most transformative work. Humility prepares us to submit ourselves to God's will, trusting that His plan is perfect even when we don't understand it. Humility allows us to say, "Yes, Lord," without questioning whether we are the right person for the job, simply trusting that God knows us better than we know ourselves. The Bible offers numerous examples of individuals who exemplified humility and, as a result, were able to fulfill God's mission in powerful ways. Two prominent figures that come to mind are Moses and Mary. Moses, as mentioned, was called by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, but he initially hesitated, feeling inadequate for such a monumental task. However, his humility in recognizing his limitations and his trust in God's plan enabled him to overcome his fears and doubts. Despite his reluctance, Moses accepted the mission God had for him, and his leadership played a pivotal role in freeing the Israelites from slavery. His humility did not hinder him. Instead, it made him open to God's guidance and empowered him to accomplish great things. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is another powerful example of humility. When the angel Gabriel visited her to announce that she would conceive the Son of God, Mary humbly accepted this incredible responsibility, despite the fear, uncertainty, and social stigma it would bring. Her famous response, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled," Luke 1:38, shows her unwavering trust in God's plan, even though she didn't fully understand it. Mary's humility allowed her to embrace God's mission, not for personal glory, but to bring Christ into the world. Both Moses and Mary exemplify the type of humility needed to accept God's mission. They did not view their roles as burdens, but as privileges to serve God's greater purpose. They understood that their lives were part of something much bigger than themselves, and they trusted that God, in His wisdom, would equip them for the journey ahead. Humility is the key to understanding our role in God's plan. It is not about belittling ourselves, but recognizing our true place in God's greater design. Humility helps us acknowledge that all we have comes from God, and it opens our hearts to His guidance, enabling us to accept and fulfill the mission He has entrusted to us. Through the examples of biblical figures like Moses and Mary, we see that humility is essential in fulfilling God's call, even when it seems daunting or beyond our capabilities. Humility is the foundation upon which we build our ability to serve God and others, and it is through humility that we can truly understand our divine purpose. By embracing humility, we make ourselves available for God's work, knowing that His plans are always greater than our own. Humility is at the heart of accepting God's guidance, especially when His plan for our lives differs from what we may have envisioned for ourselves. It takes humility to surrender our personal desires and ambitions, recognizing that God's wisdom and purpose are far greater than our own. In our human nature, we often strive for control, wanting to shape our future based on our own plans. However, true humility allows us to acknowledge that we do not have all the answers, and that God's plan for us is infinitely more perfect than anything we could devise. When we approach God's guidance with humility, we trust in His divine wisdom and timing. Humility teaches us to listen deeply, to discern God's voice in the midst of life's distractions, and to be obedient to His calling, even when it leads us down unexpected paths. It is an act of trust, choosing to believe that God knows what is best for us, even when we don't fully understand the reasons behind His direction. For example, consider the story of Abraham. In Genesis 12, God calls Abraham to leave everything he knows, his family, his land, and his comfort, and go to a new land that God would show him. Abraham's response was one of obedience, not understanding fully where he was going, but trusting in God's direction. This act of humility, of choosing to follow God's guidance, even without knowing the full picture, was foundational in fulfilling God's mission for Abraham. His willingness to listen and obey set the stage for God's promises to unfold in his life. Similarly, in our own lives, humility enables us to recognize that God's plan may not always align with our personal preferences or expectations. Sometimes, His guidance leads us into unfamiliar territory or requires sacrifices that challenge our comfort zone. But humility opens our hearts to trust that whatever God asks us to do is for our ultimate good, even if it requires a leap of faith or navigating an uncertain future. Accepting God's guidance is an act of surrender, a letting go of our own agendas to make room for God's greater purpose. Embracing God's mission does not mean that life will be without challenges. In fact, accepting His calling often means stepping into circumstances that require us to grow, adapt, and stretch beyond our comfort zones. Humility plays a crucial role in how we approach and navigate these challenges. Instead of becoming disheartened or discouraged when things become difficult, humility helps us face these obstacles with courage and perseverance, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. Challenges are an inevitable part of walking in God's plan. They test our faith, resilience, and trust in God's wisdom. Humility helps us understand that these challenges are not signs of failure, but opportunities for spiritual growth. When we humbly accept the difficulties that come with fulfilling God's mission, we allow God to work in us, refining our character and strengthening our faith. For instance, consider the Apostle Paul, who faced numerous hardships in his life while fulfilling his mission to spread the gospel. Paul endured imprisonment, beatings, shipwrecks, and opposition from both his own people and those who did not accept Christ. Yet, through it all, he remained steadfast in his calling. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul writes, But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul's humility allowed him to accept that God's power would be evident through his weakness, and this enabled him to persevere through difficult circumstances. Like Paul, when we face challenges in our own lives, humility enables us to rely on God rather than on our own strength. Humility is the key to not allowing challenges to break us, but instead to help us grow spiritually. Humility opens our hearts to trust that God is using these moments to prepare us for greater things, and that He is walking with us, even when the journey is hard. Humility also helps us accept that not every challenge will have an immediate resolution or clear explanation. We may not always understand why we face specific trials, but humility teaches us to trust in God's sovereignty. This acceptance is critical for finding peace in the midst of suffering and understanding that God is in control. Our faith in Him and His guidance allows us to face life's difficulties with grace, knowing that every step of the journey is part of His divine plan. As we practice humility in accepting God's mission, we not only grow spiritually, but we also become examples for others. Our willingness to submit to God's plan and endure challenges with faith becomes a testimony of God's goodness and power. By living out our mission with humility, we show others the importance of trusting in God's guidance and relying on His strength to carry us through life's difficulties. When we humbly follow God's mission, others take notice of our faith, perseverance, and obedience. Our actions speak louder than words, and our willingness to live out God's calling with integrity and humility can inspire others to do the same. Whether it's in our personal relationships, in our work, or in the way we serve others, humility allows us to lead by example, demonstrating what it means to follow God's plan. Take the example of Mother Teresa. Her life was a powerful witness to humility and dedication to God's mission, despite the many challenges she faced, including working in difficult and often dangerous conditions. She humbly accepted the mission God gave her to serve the poorest of the poor. Mother Teresa did not seek fame or recognition. Instead, she lived her life with a singular focus on God's mission to love and serve others. Her humility, love, and unwavering commitment to God's call continue to inspire millions around the world. Likewise, when we embrace humility and faithfully follow God's mission, we become role models for others. Our humility allows us to serve others without expecting anything in return, showing them the love and grace of God through our actions. People are drawn to humility because it reflects God's character. By living humbly, we demonstrate to the world that our value comes not from our achievements or status, but from our relationship with God. Moreover, humility fosters an environment of unity. As we humble ourselves in God's service, we encourage others to do the same. The example of humility in one person can spread and inspire others to follow suit, creating a ripple effect of humility and service in communities, workplaces, and families. In this way, our humble acceptance of God's mission can lead others to discover their own calling and purpose in life. Humility plays a crucial role in our ability to accept and fulfill the mission God has given us. It opens our hearts to God's guidance, helping us trust in His wisdom and timing, even when it leads us down unfamiliar paths or into difficult circumstances. Humility also enables us to face the challenges that come with God's calling with courage and perseverance, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. Furthermore, as we live out God's mission with humility, we become an example for others, inspiring them to embrace their own calling and trust in God's guidance. Ultimately, humility is the key that allows us to fully embrace God's mission for our lives, enabling us to fulfill our purpose with grace, faith, and steadfastness. Humility is a fundamental virtue that deepens and strengthens our relationship with God. At its core, humility is the recognition that we are not self-sufficient, that we need God in every aspect of our lives. This awareness opens our hearts to receive His guidance and allows us to live in accordance with His will, which brings us closer to Him. Humility, in its truest form, is not about thinking less of ourselves, but about thinking rightly about ourselves in relation to God. When we embrace humility, we come to understand that we are wholly dependent on God's grace for everything, our lives, our talents, and even the opportunities we receive. Humility enables us to approach God with reverence and respect, acknowledging that He is the Creator and we are His creation. It teaches us that no matter how much we may achieve or accomplish, it is all through God's grace and not through our own strength. The act of humbling ourselves before God also allows us to be more receptive to His guidance. When we approach God with a humble heart, we open ourselves to His wisdom, which is far beyond our understanding. Humility enables us to listen more closely to God's voice, whether through scripture, prayer, or the promptings of the Holy Spirit. It removes the distractions of self-centeredness, allowing us to focus on God's plans for us and to trust Him more fully. Through humility, we acknowledge that God knows what is best for us and that His ways are far superior to our own. This posture of humility deepens our trust and dependence on God, allowing for a more intimate relationship with Him. For example, the biblical figure of King David is often considered a model of humility in his relationship with God. Despite his many accomplishments, David acknowledged that everything he had achieved was a result of God's favor and grace. In Psalm 51, David demonstrates a humble heart as he seeks God's forgiveness, showing that humility is also essential in moments of repentance and reconciliation. His humility before God led to a deep, personal connection with Him, and God described David as a man after His own heart. Acts 13:22. David's example teaches us that humility is key to a strong and lasting relationship with God, where trust and reverence form the foundation. Humility not only strengthens our relationship with God, but also profoundly impacts the way we interact with others. Humility helps us see the inherent worth in everyone, regardless of their status, position, or behavior. It enables us to put others before ourselves, fostering empathy, forgiveness, and a willingness to help those in need. Humility teaches us to recognize that no one is perfect and that everyone, including ourselves, is deserving of grace and compassion. A humble person is quick to listen and slow to speak, understanding that they don't have all the answers and that everyone has something valuable to contribute. Humility in relationships allows for better communication because it removes the barriers of pride and self-centeredness. We begin to listen more attentively to the needs and concerns of others, fostering an atmosphere of respect and mutual understanding. This is crucial for building strong and healthy relationships, whether with family, friends, colleagues, or strangers. Humility also enables us to forgive others more readily. When we approach others with humility, we recognize that, like us, they are imperfect and prone to making mistakes. Instead of harboring resentment or holding grudges, a humble person is willing to offer forgiveness, just as God has forgiven them. This doesn't mean ignoring the wrongs done to us, but rather choosing to release the offense and show mercy. As a result, humility promotes healing in relationships, allowing both parties to move forward with a clean slate and renewed trust. In practical terms, humility helps us to serve others selflessly. We stop viewing acts of kindness or service as something that will elevate our status or reputation, but instead, we serve out of love and compassion, whether it is offering a helping hand to a friend in need or volunteering in our communities. Humility motivates us to serve without expecting anything in return. When we practice humility, we find joy in serving others and contribute to the well-being of those around us. Jesus' life is the ultimate example of humility in relationships. Despite being the Son of God, He humbled Himself by washing His disciples' feet, an act usually reserved for the lowest servant, John 13:1-17. Through this humble act, Jesus demonstrated that true greatness lies in serving others, not in asserting dominance or seeking recognition. His humility in relationships showed that we are called to love others unconditionally, with no expectation of reward or reciprocation. By following his example, we learn that humility transforms the way we relate to others and builds stronger, more compassionate relationships. Humility also has a significant positive impact on society as a whole. In a world that often values power, success, and status, humility provides a refreshing counterbalance. Humility fosters cooperation, love, and unity among individuals, encouraging people to work together for the common good rather than for individual gain. It helps reduce pride and division, which are often the root causes of conflict, inequality, and division in society. When we practice humility in society, we become agents of change, promoting peace and harmony in our communities. Humility encourages us to consider the needs of others before our own, leading to greater empathy and understanding. It helps us see people as they are children of God, worthy of respect and dignity, regardless of their social, economic, or cultural background. In this way, humility breaks down barriers and fosters inclusivity. In a society where self-promotion and competition are often emphasized, humility challenges us to focus on service, collaboration, and mutual respect. It helps create a culture where people are valued not for what they achieve, but for who they are, as individuals made in God's image. Humility also encourages leaders to serve those they lead with love and compassion, rather than seeking power or control. When leaders embody humility, they create an environment of trust and cooperation, where people are empowered to work together for a shared vision. The positive impact of humility in society can be seen in the lives of many great leaders and social reformers throughout history. Mahatma Gandhi, for example, practiced humility throughout his life, even as he led India to independence. Despite his influential role, Gandhi's humility led him to live simply and to prioritize the welfare of others over his personal desires. His approach to leadership, rooted in humility and non-violence, inspired millions and continues to be a model for societal change today. Humility also encourages individuals to care for the marginalized and oppressed. By placing ourselves in the shoes of others, we are more likely to empathize with their struggles and take action to help alleviate their suffering. This is especially crucial in a society where inequality and injustice persist. Humility allows us to recognize that we are all interconnected and that our actions can either contribute to or heal the divisions within society. Humility plays a transformative role in both our spiritual and social lives. It strengthens our relationship with God by helping us approach Him with trust and reverence, opening our hearts to His guidance. Humility also profoundly impacts our relationships with others by fostering empathy, forgiveness, and a willingness to serve. It enables us to build stronger, more compassionate connections with those around us, reflecting the love and grace of God in our interactions. Furthermore, humility has a positive effect on society by promoting cooperation, understanding, and unity, and by reducing pride and division. As we practice humility, we become agents of change, contributing to a more loving and just world. Through humility, we can truly live out our purpose in God's plan, serving others and making a meaningful difference in the world. Humility is often seen as a virtue that emerges in moments of difficulty or hardship, but in truth, it should be a daily practice, woven into every aspect of our lives. Humility is not something we turn to only when we face challenges, but something that should permeate our everyday interactions, decisions, and attitudes. It begins with small actions and intentional choices that reflect a heart willing to serve others and a mind open to learning and growing. One of the most foundational ways to practice humility daily is by actively listening to others. In our fast-paced, self-absorbed world, it can be tempting to focus on our own thoughts, opinions, and needs. But humility allows us to take a step back and truly hear those around us. Listening attentively, without the urge to interrupt or judge, demonstrates a humble spirit. It is an acknowledgement that others have valuable perspectives to offer, and that their words and experiences are just as significant as our own. Humility also manifests in avoiding arrogance and self-promotion. Every day, we are presented with opportunities to either elevate ourselves or deflect attention to others. Humility teaches us to avoid boasting or seeking recognition for our achievements. Rather than seeking credit for our efforts, we find joy in contributing without the need for validation. Whether in the workplace, at home, or in social settings, we practice humility by recognizing that our worth is not defined by our accomplishments or the applause of others, but by our ability to serve with love and kindness. Being open to learning from others is another essential aspect of daily humility. A humble person does not believe they know everything or have all the answers. Instead, humility means being receptive to feedback, seeking wisdom from those around us, and understanding that everyone has something valuable to teach us. Whether it's a mentor, a colleague, a friend, or even someone we might consider an opponent, there is always an opportunity to learn and grow through humility. This attitude fosters a sense of openness, curiosity, and gratitude for the people and experiences that God places in our lives. Furthermore, humility involves recognizing and accepting our own limitations. It is about understanding that we are not perfect and that we will make mistakes. When we approach our flaws with humility, we are able to acknowledge our need for growth and improvement. This openness to recognizing our shortcomings allows us to seek guidance from God and others, which deepens our relationship with both God and the people around us. Embracing God's mission is not a one-time decision, but a daily process that requires intentionality and commitment. God's calling for our lives is not static, it is dynamic and unfolds with each new day. While there may be pivotal moments where we clearly recognize God's mission for us, the true essence of embracing God's plan comes from living out His will on a day-to-day basis. Each day offers us a new opportunity to live out God's purpose, whether through small tasks or significant responsibilities. God's mission is embedded in our everyday actions. Humility plays a vital role in embracing this mission, as it allows us to serve without seeking recognition and to align our actions with God's will, not our own ambitions. Every interaction, every choice, and every moment presents an opportunity to glorify God by humbling ourselves before His plan for us. Consider the example of someone who has a job they may not necessarily feel passionate about or may view as mundane. Practicing humility and embracing God's mission means recognizing that no task is too insignificant to serve His purpose. It is in these moments, whether answering emails, completing household chores, or interacting with colleagues, that we are called to act with love, integrity, and dedication. By performing these tasks with a humble heart, we reflect God's character and demonstrate His love through our actions. Embracing God's mission also involves being faithful in the small, seemingly insignificant things, which can sometimes be the most meaningful. In the Gospels, Jesus speaks of the importance of faithfulness in small things, saying, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." Luke 16:10. By staying humble and committed to God's mission each day, we set the foundation for greater tasks and responsibilities that may come in the future. The way we serve in the little moments is often a reflection of how we would respond to larger calls from God. Humility allows us to accept that God's mission is not always about achieving personal success or recognition. It's about living for something bigger than ourselves, following God's lead and living out His purpose in our everyday actions. Embracing God's mission means accepting that our plans may be different from God's, but trusting that His purpose will ultimately lead to greater fulfillment and joy than we could imagine on our own. At the core of humility is the willingness to serve others. Jesus, the ultimate example of humility, lived His life in service to others, teaching that true greatness lies in serving, not being served. Mark 10:45. In our own lives, Practicing humility means looking beyond our own needs and desires and choosing to put others first. Serving others with humility is a powerful way to live out God's mission and reflect His love in the world. Humility in service is not just about performing acts of kindness, but about doing so with the right heart. When we serve others, we do so not to gain praise or recognition, but out of love and dedication, whether it's helping a neighbor with their groceries, volunteering at a local charity, or supporting a friend in need. Our service reflects our humble hearts and our willingness to live for the benefit of others. Serving others with humility also means doing so without expecting anything in return. In a world where people often measure their worth by what they receive, humility teaches us to serve without expecting recognition or reward. This type of service can be difficult, especially when we feel unappreciated or overlooked. However, humility reminds us that the value of our service is not in the outcome, but in the act itself. It is the heart of the servant, not the applause of others, that glorifies God. Additionally, humility in serving others allows us to recognize the inherent dignity of every person. We are reminded that each person we encounter is created in God's image and deserving of respect and compassion. Humility enables us to see others not as means to an end, but as people with unique stories, struggles, and needs. When we serve others through the lens of humility, we approach them with empathy and love, striving to meet their needs and lift them up, just as Christ would. Humility also helps us serve with a spirit of gratitude. The more we recognize how much God has done for us, the more we are compelled to serve others in return. When we serve with gratitude, we view each act of kindness as an opportunity to give back and reflect God's love. Serving others is not a burden or a duty, but a privilege and a calling that aligns us with God's purpose. Practicing humility and embracing God's mission every day is a vital part of living out our purpose in Christ. Humility is not just reserved for difficult times, but is a virtue that shapes our daily lives, from how we interact with others to how we perform the tasks God has given us. Embracing God's mission means recognizing that every moment is an opportunity to serve others and fulfill His plan. Humility in serving others is an essential aspect of this calling, as it teaches us to put others before ourselves and to find joy in the act of service. By practicing humility daily and embracing God's mission, we not only fulfill God's purpose for our lives, but also create a more loving, compassionate, and selfless world. Through humility, we reflect Christ's love and service to the world around us, living as His faithful disciples. Humility is not just a virtue to be admired, but a core principle that shapes how we approach life, our relationship with God, and our interactions with others. Humility helps us recognize our true place in God's plan, guiding us to accept the mission He has for our lives. By practicing humility, we open ourselves to deeper spiritual growth and greater understanding of God's will. This virtue helps us live a life filled with meaning and purpose, not driven by our own desires, but by the higher calling that God has set before us. Humility also strengthens our relationships with those around us, fostering compassion, empathy, and a servant-hearted approach to life. Humility empowers us to accept our mission from God with a sense of peace and obedience. It reminds us that our lives are not our own, but a part of a greater purpose. By humbling ourselves before God and others, we become more aligned with His will and more capable of fulfilling the roles He has entrusted to us. As we practice humility, we grow closer to God and develop more meaningful relationships with those we encounter on our journey. To truly embrace God's mission, we must have humility at the center of our hearts. Without humility, we cannot fully understand or accept God's calling for our lives. Humility helps us live with integrity and honesty, seeking God's will above our own ambitions and desires. It allows us to let go of our pride and self-reliance. Instead, trusting in God's wisdom and timing, humility opens our hearts to receive His guidance and empowers us to act in faith, even when His plan challenges our understanding or comfort zones. Through humility, we accept that God's mission may not align with our personal goals, but it will always lead to something far greater than what we could accomplish on our own. Humility helps us live out this mission, not seeking praise or recognition, but acting out of obedience and love for God and others. When we humbly embrace God's mission, we become instruments of His will on earth, and through our actions, we contribute to His divine plan. As you move forward, I encourage you to practice humility in every action and decision, making it a part of your daily life. Each day provides new opportunities to embrace God's mission and to live humbly, following His guidance in all things, whether through small acts of service, deepening your relationship with God, or humbling yourself in your relationships with others. Humility will help you live a life full of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. Humility is the key to unlocking the divine purpose God has for each of us. As you continue on your journey, let humility be the foundation upon which you build your life. Allow it to shape your thoughts, actions, and interactions with others. By doing so, you will be living in alignment with the higher values that God has set for us, and your life will be a reflection of His love, grace, and purpose. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring videos. Your support helps us continue creating content that uplifts, encourages, and strengthens the faith of others. Thank you for being part of this journey.